All right. Can you explain this? What do you mean? I already did. All right. So we got Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. Am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, Feroze Sidhwa, yeah.
Feroze Sidhwa in the building. He is a trauma surgeon who went and worked in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli ethnic cleansing campaign was taking place. I am honored to have him here. He traveled all the way down here to show up in person on this day, a real hero. And we're going to talk to him about his experiences, what he saw over there. But is there anything I'm missing that you want to bring up?
No, it was my second time there. I was there in March and April of last year, and then for 3 weeks this year in March. Yeah, no, I think that's about it.
Okay. So obviously, one of the immediate questions I have to ask you are all the stupid questions that you receive whenever you do these kinds of media hits in mainstream news. And I'm just going to run through them very quickly. And we can more so talk about the fact that these people ask these questions even 19 months in. Yeah. How many Hamas militants did you see in the hospitals?
Yeah, 0. And that's it's kind of a constant thing that you get asked. But it's really, it's real weird.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I wrote a letter to the Biden administration last October, and it was signed by 98 other, me and the 99 total American healthcare workers who've worked in the Strip, and since October 7th. And what we wrote was not a single one of us has ever seen anything that could even remotely approach militarization of a hospital.
Yeah.
In Gaza, even if like a Hamas guy walked into a hospital once, that doesn't mean you just bomb the shit out of a hospital. It's crazy. Yeah. It's completely nuts.
It's illegal.
It's totally illegal, but it's also just no one would accept it if you turned the belligerents around, right? Like Benjamin Netanyahu had his prostate removed in December of last year, and he was in a hospital in Jerusalem, a civilian hospital. It's I forget the name of it. It's a beautiful hospital, but he was there for 4 days. He was running the war effort from his room by every account. Like no one says it. Well, so he actually did militarize the hospital. But would anyone accept that Hamas can just drop a bomb on it? Because no, that's crazy. Like we'd probably have a nuclear war if that happened. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
It's insane. So it just these things either work one way or they work both ways or they don't work at all. Like you just even if there were Hamas people in the hospital. It would not justify what's being done.
Israel has also conducted military operations through the espionage as well, presenting militants in their specialized units as doctors and patients to go into hospitals and actually assassinate non-belligerent, non-combatants. And it barely makes a blip in U.S. coverage in American media.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just before I went to Gaza the first time, maybe February of last year. I might have the date wrong, but and this, just to be clear, this was in the West Bank. This was not even in Gaza. They sent an assassination squad dressed up as doctors and nurses into a hospital in Jenin to kill a guy in the ICU, on a ventilator. And then I think with the 1 or 2 people that he was with. Now, yes, the guy was in Hamas, but that doesn't mean you can just execute people. Like that's not how it works. That's not a thing.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, there are rules of combat around these sorts of things. Like assassinating someone while also presenting yourself as a healthcare worker is like 3 or 4 different war crimes,
all rolled into one.
Especially when you're assassinating someone who was in a hospital bed getting medical treatment. Yeah. That's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, like if people don't understand, like back in 1864, that's when the first Geneva Convention was signed.
Yeah,
that's so long ago that the American Civil War was still happening. You know what I mean? Like it's a long time ago. So like slavery was still an open debate when Europeans decided that this stuff. That convention is about the protection of injured combatants.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's not about protecting civilians. It's about the fact that combatants, be they on this side of this side of the line or that side of the line, doesn't matter their national origin, doesn't matter their political orientation, combatants who are wounded and not participating in combat anymore, the term is hors de combat, they are protected people. It's not even like, oh, you shouldn't kill them because it's not nice. No, they are a specific protected class of people under international law. And furthermore, even like under American military codes, under Israeli military codes, it's illegal under like literally everyone agrees that it's illegal, but when you say Hamas, people just lose their minds for some reason and forget that.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, it's because of the terrorism designation,
Yeah,
and also
yeah.
in the post 9/11 universe that we live in. I think that the vague language surrounding the terrorism designation, the terrorism classification, is so that people just lose sight of the, ironically enough, international rule-based order
Yeah.
and all of the rules surrounding combat that is associated with it. It is a term that is utilized specifically to deny habeas corpus, to deny due process to people that have been branded terrorists. And on top of that, the Trump administration is actively working and following the agenda of the Biden administration as well, to basically make it almost illegal to have any sort of commentary or coverage surrounding the Palestinian side in this process, while actively claiming every single person is a terrorist, an enemy combatant. Speaking of enemy combatants, this is a little bit gruesome what we're going to be talking about here, but I wanted to talk about your experience first and foremost. How do you get into the strip? What is the organization that you work with?
So I went with Med Global. So the humanitarian sphere is like totally disjointed and screwed up. But because the Ministry of Health in Gaza is part of the government, which is run by Hamas, which is illegal. Like if I work with them directly, I'll go to prison when I come back to the U.S. You know, so you can't do that. So the way it ends up working is you apply with an NGO, an American NGO. The second time I went with it was with a group called Med Global. The first time was with the Palestinian American Medical Association, PAMA. And they feed you to what's called the EMT, the Emergency Medical Teams mechanism of the World Health Organization. So you're really like working with the WHO when you're there, but you go through an American NGO. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously these NGOs, much like all of because I've worked with a bunch of the human rights organizations that are actively working in the Gaza Strip, like they still get, they have to be checked by the Israeli government in order to even enter the Gaza Strip. Nothing goes in or out of the Gaza Strip without the Israeli government's go-ahead and without the Israeli government's constant surveillance. So I assume that there was that as well. Like I suspect you were checked by the Israeli government.
Oh,
as well, at the point of
so,
entry.
on the first time I went was March. I think I went in March 25th of 2024, and at that time the Rafah border hadn't been taken yet, so we went in through Egypt. And the Egyptian soldiers, they checked to make sure we weren't bringing in weapons, which is kind of reasonable. But they did not stop us from taking in medical supplies. They didn't turn anybody away in the team. Now, I think it was May 2nd or 7th. I'm blanking now, but anyway, early May, the Israelis took Rafah and just destroyed the crossing. So it's just completely closed now. So now you have to fly to Amman in Jordan, right? You have to come across the Jordan River, over the King Hussein Bridge into the West Bank. You have to get from your Jordanian bus onto an Israeli bus. And because you have to get onto an Israeli bus and travel through Israeli territory, they say that these people, that meaning us, the medics coming in, that we have to adhere to Israeli tourism restrictions, which is just ludicrous. And it's beyond idiotic, And so that means we can't bring any medical supplies. We can basically only bring things that we need for ourselves, like your own. And they got a little bit better about this, or a little bit less restrictive, I guess. But it was just unbelievably petty at first. Like it was actually to the point where if you brought like a bottle of Tylenol, they would open it, they would dump out all the pills, and then I swear to God, I'm not making this up, they would count out how many Tylenol pills you could need in your like 2 or 3 weeks, and they would say you can take this much, not these ones. It's like these are
they did not want you to give your own personal medicine to the Palestinians.
Yeah, and like you got to remember, these are like uniformed Israeli security personnel doing this, meaning that the state of Israel has decided that this is the highest priority for Israeli security.
I'm losing my mind.
It's completely nuts. Mark Perlmutter he's an American hand surgeon. He happens to be Jewish. He came with some microsurgical instruments because he's a hand surgeon, so he's fixing these like delicate nerves in the arm and the forearm. And so he came with these microsurgical instruments. They're like literally this big pieces of metal. And he's a Jewish person from the United States coming in to help the Palestinians, and they confiscated them. They said, no, you can't take these. He was like, but I need them to do my work. And they were like, well, you can't take them. And you're like, what possible security threat could these things pose? It's just completely silly.
Yeah.
So there's that. But on top of that, the second thing with that is that when you apply, they give everybody, all the medical personnel, they give you what's called pre-approval. This is COGAT, the Israeli office. They give everybody pre-approval. So you fly to Jordan. You've taken a month off of work. If you're, like for me, I told my parents I love them. I made a living will because the possibility of getting killed there, it's not high for a foreign healthcare worker, but it's not zero either. Like I was about 2 minutes away from being killed when they attacked Nasser on March 23rd. But you do all of this, and then literally 6 to 12 hours before you're going to go in, they give you final approval, which half of people are just denied. There's no explanation given.
Oh, so they make it all the way out there, and then they just get denied.
Yes, and then you get denied at the last minute. And on my trip, there were 5 healthcare workers that were going to go in. I got approval, and I'm a man of military age. You could argue. I'm 43, but whatever.
You're brown.
I'm brown.
Yeah.
I've been extremely vocal since I got out. I wrote an article in the New York Times. I wrote an article in Politico. I've been on, lots of podcasts and on CNN and all that stuff. And so I was approved at the final approval, they call it. I got final approval. Tammy Abu Ghanayem was the other person on there. She is Arab Jordanian. She's an American, but she was, of Arab Jordanian descent. She was allowed in. John Kaler, who's a 78-year-old pediatrician with 2 fake knees, was denied. Bing Lee, who is a 100-pound Chinese-American woman and an American Army veteran, was denied. And Wilhelmi Masi, who is a late 50s Tanzanian immigrant to the U.S. with American citizenship, was denied. So, based on what? It's totally arbitrary and totally absurd. And it's to the point that sometimes people have been denied, and then literally they just reapply, and the next week they're approved. And you're like, what? How did I go from being a security threat last week to not this week? It's completely arbitrary. It's completely and utterly ridiculous. And the Biden administration, remember they sent a letter to the Israelis that was leaked back in October. That was the famous, you have 30 days, which just happens to fall a few days after the election to do these things, and they didn't do any of them.
Yeah.
One of the things they wrote was that you have to get rid of these onerous and absurd restrictions on medical teams coming in. The Israelis just told them to go to hell. They just didn't do it. And election's over. What can we do now?
My attitude on this is that America is the big dog in this process.
Totally.
So everything that Israel is doing, American leadership might claim that there's nothing we can do, but they hold all the cards ultimately.
100%.
And if they wanted to let in as much aid as physically possible, it's all it would take is one phone call.
A phone call. It's literally a phone call. Biden could have done it. Harris could have done it. Blinken could have done it. Lloyd, and literally anybody high up in the U.S. government could do it. Trump could do it right now if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. The idea, does Israel have an unusual level of influence in the United States? Yes, no doubt about that. But it's not a case of the tail wagging the dog. The U.S. is absolutely in charge. The second Trump wants to say stop, they have to stop. The second Biden wanted to say it, I mean, Biden didn't know where he was, to be fair, but
but he has. But in 2021, Biden actually stopped Israel's siege on Gaza, one of numerous sieges that Israel had conducted on Gaza, and what they call mowing of the lawn operations.
Yeah.
So
it's not like these people didn't know. It's not like they couldn't figure it out, but they just chose not. They're continuing to choose not to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So in your experience, a lot of harrowing accounts have come out of medical professionals that have gone into the Strip, and there was even a unique piece in the New York Times with medical professionals talking about the types of patients they were treating, talking about the types of wounds that these patients had received, specifically children with children that were sniped in the head. And on their bodies. Is there something that you could? What was unique about your experience as far as doing this kind of trauma surgery in the Gaza Strip as opposed to your normal day-to-day experience?
Yeah, so I work in Stockton, California, which is I work at the only trauma center for about 1 million people in one of the poorest counties in the state. one of the most violent counties in the state. And, you know, so we see a lot of trauma, no doubt about it. But it was really, it was just absolutely, there was nothing remotely approximating this when I got to Gaza. You know, the first thing, like when you get to, when I got to European Hospital, yeah, Nate Diaz, exactly. When I got to European Hospital, the whole place was actually a displaced persons camp. And like not just the grounds around the hospital, but actually lining the corridors of the hospital were about 1,500 people just living in tents, but in the hospital's, you know, corridors. It was impossible to keep anything clean. It was impossible, you know, you couldn't, like, there's no way for a hospital to function like this, right? So that was like that was the first thing. It was just like everything was filthy, and it was completely nuts. Like the whole sewage system would back up every third day, just be, you know, like flood the radiology department with like literally with shit, just because there was no way to stop it from, you know, like it was overburdened by like 10 times more than it was supposed to take care of. And so the even the normal types of wounds that we would deal with, like a gunshot wound to the abdomen, we open somebody, you know, remove part of their intestine, put it back together, fine. Like that person should recover 100% of the time. Maybe they'll get a small wound infection. It won't be a big deal. They should be home in a week. Those patients would go on to sometimes die of sepsis that we couldn't control because there's no way to keep their wounds clean. They're already malnourished. Even back then, like even a year ago, they were already malnourished.
Yeah.
And so even these minor injuries, again, not getting shot in the ass is not minor, but even these injuries that should have a near 100% survival rate were like 30, 40, 50%, which is just absolutely nuts. But then, yeah, the unique types of injuries that we saw were especially related to children. It was just about, you know, half of Gaza is kids, and about half of the severely injured people we saw were children. And I don't mean like 17-and-a-half-year-old boys. I mean like pre-teenage children.
Yeah.
Like people who through a scope or on a camera are visibly kids, you know? Yeah. And that was pretty shocking. And, you know, yeah, so when I got back, I wrote the first letter I wrote to the Biden administration was 45 doctors and nurses who had worked in Gaza. And one of the things we pointed out was that we all saw children, like, again, small children regularly shot in the head or the chest. So the New York Times opinion team reached out to me and they said, we want to know more detail, like, which is, you know, that seems sensible. So I was like, okay. So we put together a poll of, and I think 65 people responded in total, including me. And of the people who worked in the right setting, meaning like, you know, because like if you're an obstetrician, nobody's going to call you when a kid gets shot in the head. But of the people who worked in the right setting, the emergency room, a neurosurgeon, a trauma surgeon like me, an anesthesiologist, critical care doctor, that kind of thing, I think it was 80, 83, 84% regularly saw children shot in the head or chest. That's wild, you know? You can't argue that, and like the reason I focused on that in that piece was because you can't go when someone drops a bomb and it kills a child or it shreds a child. Of course, it's very dramatic and it's tragic, but you can argue, oh, well, there was a Hamas guy right next to him, and you know, human shields, all this nonsense we hear all the time. It's totally false, but you can still claim it. But when a small child is being shot in the head or the chest throughout the Gaza Strip on a regular or daily basis in the catchment area of every hospital where there's an international presence, that you're getting into like ridiculous territory with no
coordination from healthcare officials. But yet they all have the same exact firsthand accounts and firsthand testimony.
Yeah. No, none of us even knew each other before we got there.
Which made it undeniable. And the very fact that it is even a necessity for trauma surgeons and healthcare professionals to come back from the Gaza Strip to reveal this information is yet another testament to, I guess, the success that the Israeli government has had with having zero access into the Gaza Strip for the media,
for journalists. Journalists. You know, one of the things about American reporters are very, for the most part, are very good. There's lackeys everywhere, right? But the reporters themselves are very smart. They're usually pretty honest. When they've gone to Gaza and reported during Israeli wars, they've been pretty honest, you know? Oh, like, we saw a Hamas guy fire a rocket from over there, and then a day later, a bomb dropped in this area when there was a crowd there. And you're like, okay, and obviously that didn't do anything but kill the crowd of people. Yeah. Or like, you remember when, it must have been during Operation Protective Edge, I think in 2014, there was the shelling of the children playing on the beach. And the Israelis tried to claim that they came out of a Hamas compound.
Yeah.
And but this happened right across from the hotel where journalists all live. And they were like, that was a fisherman's shack, like a rundown fisherman's shack. You could not possibly believe.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? This is just ridiculous. So like when they see things themselves, they report on them pretty honestly. And that's the whole reason that they're not allowed to go in,
Yeah.
And even Piers Morgan has figured this out. Like like every time he talks to, what do you call it? Like an Israeli spokesperson now, he just keeps pointing out that like, if you wanted me to believe anything you're saying, you would let journalists into the Gaza Strip. It's pretty straightforward.
Even Sky News has started making those calls as well.
Yeah.
Western media has now officially started doing normal coverage on any kind of correspondence coming out of the Israeli government. It took 19 months of unlimited child murder for them to finally arrive at this position, only after Western leadership basically created a new permission structure by saying, we're going to reconsider our free trade agreements in the future with Israel, while they still continue to supply F-35 parts like England does, or even surveillance planes like England does off of Cyprus.
Yeah.
And
I think a big part of it is also now you can blame it on Trump.
Yeah.
And the media hates Trump. And I'm no big fan of Donald Trump, to be honest. But now that it can be blamed on Donald Trump and not the Democrats, all of a sudden it's obvious that what's going on is genocidal and wrong. And all of a sudden it's obvious that when somebody makes a patently ridiculous claim, it's patently ridiculous, and we should point that out in real time. It's just it's really, and like after almost 3 months of, actually more than 3 months of starvation, like literal starvation, no food in or out of a besieged territory that is half children, 70% refugees, and the size of Philadelphia. No food in or out.
Yeah.
And we're confused as to whether or not there's starvation. But no, at least people are waking up to it.
Yeah. Also, on top of that, are you familiar with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the scheme that the American and Israeli government has actually coordinated with? Which, of course, again, illegal under international humanitarian law, that the belligerent occupiers that are conducting warfare can weaponize aid.
Yeah.
After doing months of starvation, deliberate starvation, to turn around and weaponize aid distribution like this in an effort to then continue killing people that are walking, 7 miles.
Oh yeah,
both
it's completely
ways.
ridiculous.
Children walking 7 miles both ways to get a crumb of food. It's incredibly inhumane. It's unimaginable cruelty. And I'm really appreciative that you took the time out today to come and speak on this with your own personal experience, especially because there's only so much I can do. I mean, I've interviewed Motaz Zaiza and other people, and have constant correspondence with people in the Strip, including now assassinated journalists like Hossam Shabbat, And I hope that more people will take what you have to say seriously.
Yeah.
What are some of the more annoying things that you've experienced coming back and having to speak on these issues, having to speak on the bloodshed that you watched unfold?
I think I have a little more grace for people sometimes maybe than other people do, and I totally get why people are like, look, how long does it take for you to figure out what's going on? Like, how many people have to say it? How clear does it have to be before you can just stand up and say what is obviously true? But for me, the thing that's kind of frustrating is just that every time we talk about it on not here, but like in mainstream media of any kind, it's always still presented as the Israel-Hamas war, Like I just gave some testimony at the UN Security Council the other day, and I just described all the same stuff that I'm describing here, nothing unusual, and nothing they hadn't heard before. And someone actually asked the Israeli ambassador, Danny Danon, I think is his name.
Oh yeah, we are very familiar with Danny.
Yeah, it's kind of,
he's done wonderful things such as make a quilt that children had made at the UN office. He made a big fuss about that and then took it down because the quilt I shit you not. I'm not even joking. The quilt had writing on it that said peace.
Yeah. No, that sounds like the kind of thing Dan Denon would do. Yeah. He's a special human being. Yeah, but so somebody actually asked him, they said, one of the reporters one of the briefers that's going to speak today is a doctor who wrote an article in the New York Times about Israeli soldiers shooting children in the head. Can you comment on that? And he didn't quite deny it. He just said, look, we all know there's suffering in Gaza, but it's all Hamas's fault. And every time, again, not here, but like every time I talk about this in any kind of mainstream scenario, circumstance, I have to explain like ad nauseum that no, Hamas is not like forcing the Israelis to drop bombs on schools, or it's ridiculous. Like you can't. This has nothing to do with Hamas. It doesn't even seem like the Israelis are trying to attack Hamas at this point. They just seem to be attacking the civilian population straightforwardly. I was there. I got there on March 6th. And from March 6th to March 18th was what's called ceasefire time. There wasn't really a ceasefire, but I mean, there was a ceasefire from Hamas, but not from the Israelis. But at least the Israelis weren't bombing the hell out of the place anymore, just shooting people occasionally. And but on March 18th, the widespread bombing resumed. And the target, which the Israelis were perfectly clear and open about, there was no attempt to hide it. The target was Hamas politicians.
Yeah.
It was the prime minister, the agriculture minister. What are you doing? Like, does anyone think, again, just like turn the belligerents around? Nobody thinks that that if Hamas was going to break the ceasefire and they went into, like, they invaded Tel Aviv and they shot
blew up the Knesset.
Benjamin Netanyahu dead in his bed, along with all, however many kids he has and his cousin that happened to be visiting, and like, and by the way, it's in the middle of Purim. This is insane. Like, there'd be we would start a nuclear war over this.
Yeah.
It's completely crazed what's going on, and there's no attempt to even pretend that it's an adherence with international law or even Israeli law. To be perfectly honest, it's wild. It's just totally wild.
I'm thinking of like what are some of the more common like idiotic things that I hear on a regular basis to have your firsthand testimony against. Like one of the things that during the ceasefire, the limited ceasefire that took place, I alongside some other journalists tried to start a petition to open up the Rafah crossing so that Western media could actually go through. Yeah. I was working alongside some people. Obviously, that never happened. Israel did not allow that to happen. But in the process, one of the things that many people were directing my way was the notion that if I were to actually enter the Gaza Strip, that the real fear that I would experience would be from Hamas and not from Israeli rockets or an Israeli assassination from Israeli drone strikes. Now, what do you have to say to that kind of idiotic statement, considering that you are an American citizen and therefore, in the minds of the morons, a high-profile target for hostage taking?
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I'm not Muslim. I'm an atheist, but my family is Zoroastrians. They're for like a non-Muslim ethnic and religious minority in India and Pakistan, So I am not, and I don't speak Arabic. So easy target, high value American physician. Yeah. Furthermore, they're with a Jewish American guy, Mark Perlmutter.
Yes. These guys are supposed to be super anti-Semitic.
Yeah, and exactly. This is like all the anti-Semitism in the world. And I'll tell you a story, and I don't think I'm outing Mark by telling him this because he's said it before too. Mark is Jewish, and he didn't know much about the conflict before getting there. And he and I were in the van going from Cairo over to Rafah together. And his last name's Perlmutter, so I knew he was Jewish. And he mentioned it. He was like, "Oh, I'm just a little nervous going because I'm Jewish." And I was like, "Mark, I know you won't believe this, but you will never meet less anti-Semitic people than the place you're about to go. I'm sure there's an anti-Semite somewhere, but And I told him, I was like, I don't get it. Like, honestly, intellectually, I don't understand how these people have maintained such a sharp distinction in their head between Jews and Israelis, but they have. It's very odd, honestly. Like, most conflicts devolve into less understanding, but they've maintained that just because, Jews were part of the fabric of Palestine before the Zionist project started. But anyway, that night, it was Ramadan back like last year when I went too. That night we got back together for iftar, the evening meal. And I was like, Mark, how did it go? And he was like, oh my God. Like he actually like almost came, he's a very sensitive guy. He like almost came to tears explaining what had happened. He was like, I started off, I just said, I'm Mark. And they said, hi, welcome, Mark. And then I said, I'm Mark and I'm an American. He was like, oh, okay. Oh, well. And like they became a little more welcoming. He said, I'm Mark Perlmutter. And I'm an American. They were like, okay. And then I'm Mark Perlmutter. I'm Jewish and I'm an American. And when he said I was Jewish, people would hug him. They would kiss him on the cheeks. They would say, oh my goodness, it's so lovely to have a Jewish person come. I've never met a Jewish person who wasn't trying to kill me. And my grandmother told me all these stories about the nice Jewish family that lived down the street from them in Jerusalem. And that, and he was like, in 12 hours, his whole understanding of who these people are, what they are, what drives this conflict was just shattered. And he's never been the same since, honestly. He's like, it's really, these kinds of stories are, and furthermore, like literally every Jewish person who goes to even to Gaza, but like just to anywhere in the West Bank, and meets Palestinians, they all have exactly the same experience. Yeah. Because it's not, from the standpoint of the Palestinians, this is not a religious conflict, Yeah. They don't see it that way. Sorry, I forgot what you asked me, to be honest.
No, that's a great anecdote, though. I mean, no, the question was like,
did I feel I was threatened by Hamas?
Feel threatened by Hamas?
No, I mean, there's no way I didn't meet Hamas people there, right?
Of course, because they're a part of the.
They're a part of the.
They're a part of the civil governance of the entire Strip.
Yeah.
So there is a distinction between the Al-Qassam brigades, which you might have even encountered.
I might
as
have,
well.
yeah.
And again. The way that Western media treats it is as though they're aliens. Like they're actually outside of the Strip for some reason. Yeah. No, they're orphaned soldiers that literally are Palestinian that were born into one of these refugee camps.
Yeah. So the guy, one of the people that founded Hamas was a pediatrician, if I'm remembering correctly, named Rantisi, and his father was executed by Israeli forces in the 1956 occupation of Gaza during when Israel invaded Gaza and the Sinai during the 56 war. He was part of the Fedayeen resistance, and he was killed. And so Rantisi went on because his father had been killed, and he went on to found Hamas. Yeah. Hamas has always taken the plight of Palestinian prisoners, Palestinian orphans to heart. There are at least 6 books, and I mean like serious books, not like what's that guy's name? I forget his name now. He's the guy that just wrote on democracies and death cults. I mean, Israel's the democracy and Hamas is the death cult.
Fucking Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray, that's his name.
God, what a that piece
book.
Of
yeah, well,
shit
it's just a terrible book. It's like if you can read English, you can read and you can realize what a terrible book it is. But there are 6 books written, almost all of them written by either American or Israeli Jews. And not a single one of them concludes that Hamas is just a death cult of lunatics who just want to murder Jews. Like, is there a streak of anti-Semitism? Yeah, probably. Again, like I said, it's kind of surprising that there isn't more of that in the Palestinian territories. Yeah. But yeah, no, Hamas is just not there to wage jihad on any non-Muslim who happens to walk by. Like, that's just not what's going on. It's much more straightforward than that. There is an occupation. The Palestinians have had their country taken away from them. They've already agreed repeatedly to a straightforward 2-state solution, and it's being denied to them on purpose. That's just all that's going on. Yes, Hamas talks in Muslim rhetoric because they're Muslims. Okay, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah,
well,
no,
what do you
absolutely.
want? Like,
this is like an endless battle in the media that I have to wage with regular frequency to try to explain to Americans who just cannot comprehend the level of death and destruction, even far before October 7. That Palestinians have withstood and experienced. Yeah, and in spite of all of that, like how even militancy has evolved throughout the time. Even with Hamas as well, being like a resistance group, initially being a Muslim Brotherhood cutout, like Islamic Charity, turning into a political party and a militant resistance group, to then go from only targeting military and police officers to then also targeting civilians after the Cave of the Patriarchs massacre.
After the Goldstein massacre.
After the Goldstein massacre. and changing its targets.
In case people don't understand that, like the Hamas had, and still, I'm a doctor. I don't want anybody getting killed, soldiers, civilians, really anybody. But nevertheless, if you're going to carry out military activities in a military occupation, it's not illegal to attack soldiers and security personnel. It's not pleasant. I don't really like violence, but it's just what it is.
Yeah.
Big boys game, big boys rules. So in 1994, this guy named Baruch Goldstein, he's always described as Israeli. Actually, he was from New York, but
he's also sometimes, depending on the level of insanity, depending on how much of a kahanist you are, sometimes they say Dr. Goldstein.
And he was a physician. Actually, he was actually a physician
who refused to treat Arabs. By the way,
not hardly surprising since he shot them later. Yeah, he just walked into the Cave of the Patriarchs Mosque in Hebron in the middle of prayer and just started murdering people with just incidentally in IDF uniform and with an IDF issued rifle. So and after that, after the typical the Muslim mourning period is 40 days. After that, Hamas started carrying out suicide bombings in Israel.
Yeah.
Well, that's still bad. Like you still shouldn't they shouldn't have done that. Okay, yeah, lots of things shouldn't have happened. When you drive people to these extremes, there are people who will respond in extremes. So that's
of course
understandable.
It's an act of desperation.
It is.
Nobody wants to blow themselves up. There was like a mom that I think one of the bus stop bombings was conducted by, I believe, a mother. Like, you think that person wants to do that? Like they're people are engaging this as a direct consequence of how if death is inevitable, they're choosing the terms in which they die at that point. And that's how it was seen and calculated by them. And there's a lot of back and forth, even internally within Hamas, as far as everything that I've read on this, about how to most successfully resist against the Israeli occupation. But of course, none of that matters in this process once you slap the terrorism designation, which is very beneficial for Western powers to continue this genocidal campaign.
Yeah. And the big question is always like because you're not Palestinian, right?
No.
Yeah, and neither am I, and I'm not Israeli. Like we are involved. People like us are involved in this because we're Americans, not for any other reason. So like the political outcome of the Israel-Palestine conflict, we can all have our opinion on that, and that's fine. But the question is always like we should always ask: are we committing crimes? And the answer is yes. We are deeply, deeply involved in this. So yes, Hamas shouldn't carry out suicide bombings. That's true. Hamas shouldn't take hostages. That's true. But we also shouldn't be locking 2 million people in a cage and just letting them languish and die there. Like I think it's pretty easy to show that's a much more serious crime. Right?
Yeah.
You can, anybody who wants to talk about Hamas all day long, okay, fine. Yeah. They could probably do everybody a lot of favors by disappearing, but that's not the way the world works. There is a conflict going on there, and we are fueling it by just dumping weapons onto one side as fast as we possibly can. That's the question we should be answering. It's important to understand the history. You're not wrong about that at all, but we have to always understand what our own what are we doing in the world once we're not involved in mass slaughter of children or putting 2 million people in something that amounts to a concentration camp and just leaving them there to languish and die their entire lives. Then we can talk seriously about other people's crimes, but until then it's like some Russian telling the US that that what we're doing is wrong in Israel while they're invading Ukraine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's complete hypocrisy. It's absolute moral nonsense from start to finish. And I don't think we should be involved in that kind of thing.
Also, Hamas is very pragmatic, and what you just said, they would do everybody favors by disappearing is precisely what they have suggested.
They
in
actually,
in the ceasefire negotiations, where they said they want and this is something that even the otherwise cowardly Gulf nation states have been on board with, which is to create a Palestinian National Committee, a technocratic Palestinian National Committee, and dissolve Hamas politically, while still obviously maintaining the most knowledgeable people on government affairs to work on the Gaza Strip, to control the Gaza Strip. And yet Israel refuses.
Yeah.
That is a key part of the ceasefire negotiations that Israel actually refuses because they want Hamas to continue controlling the Gaza Strip so they can have just cause.
Yeah, so Dropsite News has done really good reporting on this.
Yeah.
I think they got all three of the original texts that the Witkoff went back and forth with Hamas and Israel. And this is absolutely shocking. It was Israel that removed the term that Hamas put in, saying that they would give up governance of the Gaza Strip to, like you said, a technocratic group of Palestinians. Fine, they've actually done this before. Incidentally, they've offered to do this before. The history of Hamas being reasonable is actually much more interesting than people know. But they were elected in 2006 or 7, I'm forgetting. 2006.
Yeah.
And then the attempted coup was in 2007, right?
Yeah.
In between that time, from 2006 to 2007, Jimmy Carter, who was he was still alive and he was able-bodied back then, he had monitored the elections, the 2006 elections.
Carter Foundation.
Yeah, the Carter Foundation had monitored them, and he not only declared that they were free and fair, he declared that they were actually better run than American elections are. No, I'm not exaggerating for effect. This is literally true. He said they were better run than American elections are, and that the party that got the most votes won. Now, Hamas won a plurality mostly because of its incompetence and stupidity of the Palestinian Authority. Yeah. But that's a different matter.
Collaborative.
Exactly. Yeah, because they're seen as collaborators. They're seen as extremely corrupt, which they are.
Which, ironically enough, this election only happened because George W. Bush forced.
He demanded it. Yeah.
George W. Bush demanded, because, again, we have all the control in whatever happens with the affairs of the Palestinians.
Yeah, how wild is that? That we decide when you have elections. Yeah. It's nuts,
George W. Bush went to the Fatah leadership. The Fatah leadership was like, the negotiations have fallen apart. Yeah. Palestinians do not like us for understandable reasons. They see us as collaborators. If you put together this election, we will lose. It is not the right time. Yeah. George W. Bush said, fuck off. You're still going to do this election. They did. And then they tried to facilitate a coup d'etat.
Yeah.
And that also failed, and that only galvanized Hamas and gave it more power in the Strip, more command over the Gaza Strip. Exactly. Yeah. And the only reason why Hamas had actually won a plurality of the votes by, like, I believe 2 or 3% margins,
something like that,
something minimal. Which, by the way, almost every single person that voted for them in 2006 is now dead. Now, okay, so there's that part of it as well. Remember, 50% of the Strip is children. They only won because they were seen as the anti-corruption party.
Right.
They were running on an anti-corruption, anti-collaboration ticket.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they voted for them.
Yeah. But between between the election and the attempted coup, Carter went around begging the United States. I still remember he wrote an article for CNN, CNN.com, and the title, the headline was "Give Hamas a Chance." Back then, actually, it was such a reasonable thought that people had that maybe these people aren't just all genetically lunatics for some reason.
Yeah.
I still remember there was an article in Time magazine, of all places, where the reporter just went to Gaza and he walked around and he was like, huh. Everybody told, the Israeli spokespeople said that, now it's like the Taliban. You have to have a long beard and men and women aren't allowed to talk to each other in public. He said, this was complete nonsense. And I still remember there was a really, really interesting, the way the article started off was he described, he literally just followed a Hamas police unit around for a few days. And they went to a guy, I forget which clan he was from, but from one of these more powerful clans in Gaza. And he went, the guy was just walking around a market with a rifle. And so the Hamas guys just surrounded him. They didn't draw their weapons on him. They said, sir, you are not allowed to walk around with a rifle. And he said, don't you know who I am? I'm from this such and such clan. I can do whatever I want. Yeah, that's it. I can do whatever I want. And they just said, look, sir, no one is above the law anymore. Now we are going to have a country of law and order. Now, you might like their law and order. You might not like it. That's a different matter. But it's just like, you can't, there was no reason that you couldn't have peace with these people. The reason that they don't have peace is because the Israelis have, ever since the Oslo Accords were signed, in 93 or something? And in the Declaration of Principles, it explicitly says that Gaza and the West Bank are a single territorial unity, right? They are the future state of Palestine. It doesn't say that, but it says that they are a single territorial unity. The instant that document was signed, Israel set about separating them. It immediately instituted a closure of Gaza, tried to, because Gaza's main industry was agriculture and furniture building that was then exported mostly to the West Bank.
Yeah.
They immediately set about separating them, which made it basically impossible to have an economy in Gaza. So the separation was once that separation got worse and worse and worse. Obviously, then the Second Intifada breaks out in 2000, right? As it goes on, and as Hamas gets elected, now the Israelis say, "Well, crap, what are we going to do?" The Europeans are talking to Hamas. The Americans are starting to talk to Hamas. Like, what are we going to do? Coup, right? The attempted coup, and it was a godsend to the Israelis that the coup failed, because Hamas took over Gaza, which is, every government defends itself by force from coups. That's just completely normal. And Israel, backed by the PA, backed by Israel and the United States, went on an anti-Hamas purge in the West Bank. And this was just a godsend for them, because now, what do they always say? There's no one we can talk to. Which government are we supposed to talk to? It's complete nonsense.
Something that Benjamin Netanyahu's also openly admitted, because they understand that the Western perception is one of the most important parts of Israel continuing its domination.
Yeah.
And they recognize that Western perception on any sort of Islamist group is going to be incredibly negative. So they can very easily terror jacket every single person and do whatever they want. I believe it was after 2007, I remember maybe it was in 2012 or something, when he said we control how high the fire goes in a private correspondence that was later unearthed, where he was talking about the sieges that are conducted in the Gaza Strip whenever Israel increases the pressure in the West Bank. Gaza then Hamas turns around and says, "Don't do that. We will fire warning shots if you do that." And then they lob a couple bathtub-made missiles in the direction of Israel. Obviously, our tax dollars go directly to the Tamir interceptors that are fired from the Iron Dome defense structures that, quickly intercept these missiles, unless you're, a Bedouin, a Druze, and live in one of the areas that Israel surprisingly has no coverage over. So then it ends up killing Palestinian citizens of Israel. But in the aftermath of that justifies another siege, where you conduct yet another smaller ethnic cleansing campaign and destroy the civil existence in the Gaza Strip.
If anybody wants to read this in excruciating and painful detail, read Norman Finkelstein's book, Gaza: An Inquest into Its Martyrdom. I helped edit some of his books before that, like Beyond Chutzpah.
Love Norm.
He is. His writing is meticulous, and you can't, when he speaks, sometimes he's pretty aggressive, but which is fine. He's not, it's hard not to be sometimes. It's a moral outrage, but his writing is very careful and very meticulous. Basically, what he shows is that every time Israel has conducted one of these massive attacks on Gaza, basically 2008, 9, and 2014, Cast Lead and Protective Edge, is because Hamas has been getting too reasonable. They've been too vocal about about their willingness to do a two-state solution. They've been too vocal about saying that they're perfectly happy with any government running Gaza and the West Bank. They've been too vocal about wanting to get back together with Hamas and have a unity government, including a technocratic government, like you were mentioning. And this goes on, and it's just the record is just played over and over and over again. Furthermore, the Hamas rocket attacks on Israel, which again are criminal, just to be clear, just like Israel's attacks on Gaza are criminal. They're just as criminal, but the level of death and destruction they inflows is
incomparable.
To even talk about them in the same paragraph is lunacy.
Yeah.
Like, people talk about how awful October 7th was, right? And just to be clear, they're correct. October 7th was a horrific atrocity. Go back and look at the details of Operation Cast Lead, which started in December of 2008 and finished in 2009. Look at the details. You might notice that they're basically exactly the same thing, except for on October 7th, in the October 7th attacks, October 7th, 8th, and 9th, about 40 children were killed. In Operation Cast Lead, about 330 children were killed. The ratio of combatants to civilians killed is almost exactly the same. One home seems to have been destroyed during the October 7th attacks, and it was destroyed by Israeli tank fire. I forget the exact number, but thousands of homes were destroyed during Operation Cast Lead. And these attacks on Gaza just worsened and worsened and worsened and worsened. Like they just went to such extremes. After Operation Protective Edge in 2014, the head of the ICRC, Peter something I think was his name, he went to Gaza. Now this guy's only job is to go to war zones. You know, like that's literally all he does. The International Committee for the Red Cross, the head of that, he went and he said, "I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've never seen destruction on this scale in my entire life." After just 1 year of the imposition of the blockade, you know, the blockade was imposed into the extreme, like modern form of the blockade was imposed in 2007 after the coup, or after the attempted coup. Just a year later, in 2008, Mary Robinson, who was the president of Ireland, and she became one of those international elders along with Carter and other people, she visited Gaza, and when she left, she said their whole civilization has been destroyed. I'm not exaggerating. And then she went on to say, it's unbelievable that the world doesn't care while this is happening.
This is far before October 7th.
This is 2008. Yeah. It's like people, I mean, I'm sure your listeners have heard a lot of this stuff before, I apologize, but like it's the extreme nature of what has been done to Gaza, like to actually get into the details of it and explain that all like what do people say frequently? Oh, what is Israel supposed to do when Hamas has fired thousands of rockets since 2000, since they came into power? Yeah, technically that's accurate, but if you actually look at the day by day, when did they fire rockets?
Yeah,
it's almost universally, and I mean like 90-something% of the time, in response to Israeli attacks on Gaza.
Yeah.
Or Israeli assaults on the West Bank.
The West Bank.
Yeah.
And because it always escalates. Al-Aqsa is like a major factor in this,
point,
obviously.
Yeah.
And for a lot of Americans, like they don't understand it. It's like a very important, very significant religious site for the entirety of the Muslim world. And it's just
and also a symbol of Palestinian nationalism. You know?
Exactly, and they like Israel deliberately throughout historic periods of struggle, like including the Second Intifada, for example, have
which starts with an assault on them.
Used and abused and assaulted people for trying to continue their religious practice in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then Hamas will retaliate after warning Israel not to do this every Ramadan. After warning Israel not to increase pressure and not to fight against and not to like brutalize the worshippers, and Israel then predictably follows through, they will lob rockets over this Gaza border fence.
Yeah, and it just so people realize, like it's you're 100% correct. There's the blocking of worshipers going to the mosque, but it's actually far more extreme than that. Israeli the term right wing is hard to apply in Israel, but it's unfortunate, because it's most of the political spectrum. But I'm talking about like the lunatic religious far right, like people who in the U.S. we would call fascists. I mean, like they're just religious fascists. They're completely insane. These people regularly try to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah, and there's a project right now. There's a tunnel.
There's a tunnel that's been dug underneath it that might have even made this building. Like there's a lot of stuff going on there that is not given play in the American media. Like all of these things should figure into the context that's provided in regular reporting on this subject, but it's not. And that is what leaves people very, very confused about what's happening in this place and why it's happening. Because again, like I can tell everybody about everything I saw in Gaza because like I'm a doctor, right? So again, I'm a trauma surgeon. I saw lots of people shredded. I saw lots of kids killed. And you can always turn around and say, well, yeah, that's terrible, but it's all Hamas's fault. And if without context and having been denied context of, the past like 20 years, and even before that too, to be sure, but 20 years of context.
Even post October 7, matching October 7 to what has unfolded post October 7 is the reason like a lot of people started paying attention to what was going on and is the reason why Israel has officially become a pariah state in the Western world. Obviously, the Global South was always aware that Israel was a settler colonial entity that was an instrument of Western imperialism, but now even Westerners themselves have recognized that this is completely untenable. This is incredible cruelty. The reason why I wanted to show you this is what I said recently, as a matter of fact. I said, there's no comparison between Israel and Hamas. One is a militant resistance comprised of orphan soldiers born into a 77-year occupation. The other is an ethno-religious supremacist apartheid state with nukes doing a genocide backed by the USA. And of course, the ADL and numerous other outlets like Gabby Deutsch from Jewish Insider have been losing their minds over this tweet that went a little viral, I guess, but and have been saying that this is like, this is completely ridiculous to say. And the only defense that they have to say that this is ridiculous is that they try to imply that I'm saying Hamas is good.
Right.
And at no point did I say Hamas is good here. I'm just literally, accurately, and truthfully assessing the situation and covering it, as is my job. Do you feel like there's anything wrong with this statement, or at least maybe with the way that people are reacting to it?
I think probably everybody listening to you knows that the ADL is a good example. It's run by a guy named Jonathan Greenblatt, I think is his last
I know
name.
him very well.
Really?
Yeah, I am his white whale. He every time if someone sneezes in the direction of Jewish people, Jonathan Greenblatt will go on television and be like, Hasan Piker.
So do you know how Jonathan Greenblatt got his start? He's one of the, I think the founder of the original CEO, I can't remember, of Ethos Water. It's that's the water that you buy at Starbucks. So there's no way that somebody who founded I believe it's a for-profit company, but also with at least with a good ostensibly message, charitable effort, right? And they very strongly advertise that they're at least some portion of their profits, maybe it's all, I don't know, goes to building water infrastructure in places that don't have it, right? So there's no way.
Insane.
Yes, it's crazy, right? Because you already know what I'm going to say. There is no way that he is not hooked into people from Oxfam. What is Oxfam saying about what's going on right now? Oxfam actually wrote a report last year called Water War Crimes that is shocking. Like, if anybody wants to, because we all know about the violence in Gaza, but the day-to-day deprivation is actually what is the Palestinians in Gaza. And I hate saying this because I don't mean to make them sound like they're nuts somehow, but this one, the Palestinians in Gaza long ago got used to seeing people blown up. That which is horrifying, that nobody should have been put through this, but nevertheless, it's true. Despite that, the level of deprivation that is going on, and this is not new, but it's really been kicked up to 11. In this report, it was either this report or a report they put out afterwards, but in this report, they point out that at one point, there were 500,000 people concentrated into the Mawasi area. It actually got worse after that. Eventually, there were almost 1 million people there, as far as anybody can tell. But they pointed out that there were 500,000 people, and there were 120 toilets. I just want people to just think about that. It's completely nuts. Like, for leaving aside that they concentrated 500,000 people into something that I think is about the size of Los Angeles International Airport, literally. And again, not exaggerating for effect. I think that's actually correct, just factually correct. The level of deprivation in a place like this is crazed. There was one emergency medicine physician who went over. She works at Stanford. Her name's Aisha Khan, I think is her last name. Who I testified at the UN with last year. And she told us a story about receiving two or three young men who had literally drowned in feces because they were trying to dig a latrine for the camp that they lived in the Mawasi. Like, they had fallen into it. It was nighttime, and they got knocked out when they fell into. They literally drowned in shit. I mean, now, Jonathan Greenblatt probably knows that story because he knows people at Oxfam. He knows people at the United Nations. He knows people who are interested in water issues in the world. It's a major part of humanitarianism, right? How can he still go on television and not and furthermore, imagine if Jonathan Greenblatt went on TV and just said, look, we all know that Hamas is the worst thing ever, and Hasan Piker is the worst thing ever. We all know all of that, but we should all remember that children are children, and they should be given clean water. All of a sudden, his credibility would be restored, right? People would be like, "Oh, look, this guy's actually totally reasonable.
No,
he can't even do it. He can't even do it. You know,
he can't do that." But it goes in line with the same thing. Like at a time of unprecedented explosion of anti-Semitism coming from Twitter, that's owned by Elon Musk, and also some of the more like vocal, some of the largest. Supposedly quote unquote pro-Palestinian people who are not really pro-Palestinian at all, that are anti-Semitic. The reason why he puts the crosshairs on people like myself is because I'm not anti-Semitic. And as a matter of fact, I combat anti-Semitism, but also am firmly committed to anti-Zionist statements, which is the real reason why he sees me as a threat and not like a Candace Owens or a Dan Bilzerian who is seemingly more invested in saying this is all because of Jews and because of the Talmud or whatever.
Right, and Dan Bilzerian like talking about, he's just got all these like this like crazy nonsense that comes out of his head or it comes out of his mouth. Or like that I think it was also, it was Piers Morgan. He the other day he said, I had Dan Bilzerian on for half an hour spewing anti-Semitic crap before I cut him off. I was like, why did you invite Dan Bilzerian on your, what did you expect him to do?
He's a content demon.
I guess,
Now he's now he's Hamas.
It was weird.
Though.
It was very weird.
He used to be a content demon. Now he's Hamas. So it's he's
moving up in the world.
Even now, he's still it will be wishy-washy. But at least like the role reversal has been kind of funny to see. I've been on his show
really
a bunch of times. And stopped going on it because I thought it was just like utterly unproductive.
It's kind of a clown show. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
I mean, it was good for catharsis. I feel like whenever I yelled at some like weirdo Zionist and everybody enjoyed those TikTok clips, but like, now he's Hamas and the National Jewish Assembly is actually coming after him as well. Here it is.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to see how strongly people turned or how quickly people turned on him. Yeah.
The National Jewish Assembly condemns in the strongest possible terms the disgraceful performance by Piers Morgan during his recent interview with Israel's ambassador, Zipi Hotaveli, who is also another fucking demon. What unfolded was not journalism. It was hostile, one-sided ambush, a spectacle of sneering ignorance and intellectual laziness. No, what unfolded was him actually, for once, after 19 months of child holocaust that was live streamed that everyone has seen, was him basically treating one Israeli envoy in the same way that he has treated every single person that wants to say anything pro-Palestinian for the first 19 months.
Yeah.
Like every time I went on, it was like, do you condemn October 7? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn October 7? You can't get a fucking word in edgewise to talk about the situation that's unfolding without people like Piers constantly shoving things down your throat in an effort to make sure that this is like just like bullying you for even trying to maintain the idea that like Palestinians are human beings worthy of dignity,
and also just refusing to marry. I don't like the term Zionism, to be honest, but whatever. Refusing to marry Zionism and Judaism, because if they're the same thing, then obviously you got to support them because Judaism is a rich cultural heritage, rich religion, blah blah blah. That's I forget, it might have been who was it? Was it Irving Howe? I don't know. There was some commentator in the 80s and 90s who wrote that if you're Jewish and you have enough money to buy a one-way ticket to Israel and you don't, you're not a Zionist. You're something else. You know?
True. I say it all the time.
Yeah, and it's totally it's correct, but like it's one of those things where. So what are they? Well, B'Tselem actually answered that question pretty well, I think. B'Tselem's Israel's major human rights group. They answered that question pretty well when I think, when they said, they wrote a report probably 5 or 6 years ago now, in which they just asked, what is the occupation? What is going on?
Are you talking about the apartheid report?
Well, it's an apartheid report, but the way they termed it is it's the same report where they concluded that Israel is an apartheid state.
It was in 2021.
Is that what it was? There you go.
April 2021.
Nice. And the term that they used in that report is there is a single regime from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, and it is a regime of Jewish supremacy.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what it is. And there are no, I don't want anybody to think that all Jews are Jewish supremacists. In fact, a very small minority of them are. They also, but it's a very real phenomenon. I forget if it's Smotrich or Ben Gvir, but they're one of them. I think it's Ben Gvir. The name of his party is Jewish Power.
Yeah,
and it is meant exactly as Ben Gvir. Yeah, it's meant exactly in the same way as White Power is meant.
Yeah, Jewish Power Party.
It's completely nuts, and that's that's what's going on here. And so so anyway, but point being, like, if you want to have a regime of Jewish supremacy, if you're going to have certain American Jewish billionaires and other such people funding it and getting their own benefits from it, social or political or otherwise, whatever it might be, you're going to end up in a situation where you're doing a lot of really, really ugly stuff. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Really ugly stuff. And it's kind of hard to justify the slaughter of children. So it's much better to just confuse people and make them look away and say, well, that guy's an anti-Semite, or that guy's this, or that guy's that. But what you can't do is allow people to say, look, I have no qualm with Jewish people. Why would I? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not a lunatic, but I can't support this genocidal lunacy. Like, but that's why these people come after someone who is making their anytime someone interrupts that dichotomy, they're gonna try and make them less available.
Yeah, no, that's what's like really pissing people off right now is the very fact that a lot more people are aware of what Israel has been doing, its conduct in the Gaza Strip. Many people are recognizing that it's a genocide.
Because it's hard to look away from.
Many people are recognizing that Israel's an apartheid. I think that played a big role too. Like B'Tselem and a lot of these human rights organizations in 2021 openly, actively calling Israel's practice an apartheid, which it was. It was since its inception.
Yeah.
There's never been a moment where Israel was not an apartheid state. But that creates a permission structure. And in that process, I think some people make this dangerous calculation where they think that we can't really solve the PR problem that Israel's having right now, especially as the mass starvation is continuing, because that's the other thing.
Yeah,
just like you said,
pushed a lot of
children dying is undeniably cruel, but the other part of this puzzle is mass starvation. I'm always reminded of the Human Rights Watch. I think it was the head of the Human Rights Watch who is a Jewish himself. I think he's a Holocaust survivor as well, who after October 7 did not think that Israel was committing a genocide, but because of the starvation that was taking place, because of the denial of humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip to the civilian population, that's when he was like, no, this is a genocide. This is an ethnic cleansing, because it is impossible to deny that. There is no this is simply collateral damage in our military calculation that we did when we bombed a fucking hospital or a mosque or a school where people were hiding. There is no way to justify it. It is just the most definitional war crime that proves the ethnic cleansing intentions that the Israeli government has.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but actually the two founders of Human Rights Watch are both Jewish, and they have both come to the conclusion separately that Israel is in fact committing genocide. And exactly like you said, I really should remember his name, but I can't right now. What actually set the one who came to that conclusion off later, the guy who came to the conclusion after the first one, is exactly that. He said, look, you cannot justify Ken Roth is the one that came to the conclusion first. I just forget the other fellow's name, but he said you cannot justify not feeding people. That's completely nuts. And people got to remember, it's not actually just that Israel isn't supposed to stop Palestinians from receiving aid. That's obviously despicable. But they're actually, as the occupying power, they're actually responsible for feeding the Palestinians. They're responsible for actually meeting the needs of the population. But and just to be clear,
as a belligerent occupier, they're also illegally bombing Gaza. They don't have.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have a right of self-defense. Like stopping people who come over the border. Yes, nobody would deny that at all. That's certainly part of self-defense. But there is no right of self-defense that includes obliterating the Gaza Strip, or honestly even firing one bullet across the fence.
Even as a belligerent occupier, the firing one bullet into the Gaza Strip is technically illegal.
And
as opposed to what Hamas and any other person that chooses to take up arms against the Israeli invasion and ethnic cleansing campaign, there is a law under international humanitarian law. It's called spontaneous militias. And and they don't have to wear army fatigues. That's not that is under international humanitarian law. Hamas is perfectly legally resisting militarily against the Israeli occupation, especially when Israel invades the Gaza Strip. It is directly a legal a method of combat.
Yeah. So exactly. The there's and you could get into all sorts of layers about this, like especially the the International Court of Justice in a totally, it has nothing to do with South Africa's petition about the apartheid convention. It was a case pending, I think, since 2019 or 2020 for a long time, and they finally they went through all, do we have jurisdiction, blah blah blah. But finally, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which is the highest body at the United Nations, the highest legal body at the United Nations, they ruled that the occupation is illegal precisely because it's not an occupation; it's an annexation. Yeah. And basically, in other words, like, you can't annex territory under the pretext of occupying it. That's not how anything works. And so they demanded that Israel immediately, this is just last year sometime, they demanded that Israel immediately end the occupation, withdraw from the territories unconditionally, dismantle the settlements unconditionally, and negotiate. And I don't think they put this isn't in the ruling, but also that they implying that they need to negotiate a recognition of the state of Palestine and go from and have normal relations after that. And that is just like the hostages are supposed to be released unconditionally. That's always the term, right? I even said it at the UN when I said the unconditional release of all hostages. And then but I also went on to say other things unconditionally too. But like everybody is supposed to adhere to the law unconditionally. If I steal your computer or something and run over to my house and you ask for it back, I don't get to say, well, why don't you let me use it on Tuesdays and then maybe we can talk about what, once you agree that I can use it on Tuesdays, then we can negotiate. No, that's not how the law works. The law, either you do what's right or the cops will kick your door down and make you do what's right, right? Yeah. That's how, at least in theory, that's how the law is supposed to work.
In theory, because the cops are America in this process.
Right, and that's the U.S. is a co-belligerent in this, Yeah. Like, people talk about how the U.S. is complicit in, I hate this term. Like, you and I are complicit in genocide as American taxpayers. Yes. The United States government is an active participant in this, just like the UK is, just like Germany is. I would honestly argue just like even the EU still is, but that's, there's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what else have we not covered that you would want to talk about?
No, I think,
we went through the full spectrum here.
Yeah, no, it just, I just hope people realize that, talking about this stuff is important, because we all have to, you should always have your own ideas challenged and things like that, for sure. But we have to actually do something. Like, right now, Gaza is just being starved to death. I'm leaving aside the bombardment is horrendous. I still have plenty of Palestinian friends. Most of them are healthcare workers. They've all been expelled from their homes. They're all living in the Mawasi, which is just the beach, in a tent. And they're all telling me they're not eating at all. They can't feed their kids. They can't, if this continues, Gaza is just there's 1 million children there, and they're just going to be starved to death. It's this kind of thing is crazy. We do not have to accept that as Americans. We are not helpless people. Yes, it's not nice to be called bad things by the Anti-Defamation League, or you don't seem to care too much.
No, I don't give a shit.
But it doesn't I get people sending me nasty grams on Twitter, or fine, but and yes, we should remember we're lucky as American citizens, right? Like, if you're a foreign student right now, you're desperately trying to avoid getting kidnapped on the streets by ICE.
Even walking by a pro-Palestinian rally,
Right? Yeah.
is enough for the government to basically black bag you.
Yeah, I don't know if you. I think I was just reading it out there before I came on. Drop Site News just I think it was The Intercept actually. They just had a thing about how the U.S. government demanded that Instagram, or they demanded a search warrant for some Columbia University group, some pro-Palestinian group's Instagram, so that they could know exactly who is on it. And the Intercept pointed out it's extremely unusual for a judge to deny just a search warrant, let alone to deny it multiple times. Like that's how thin this crap is. But
I think
nevertheless,
the reason why they're doing that
still
is because
doing
of the absolutely psychotic civil suit that initially was launched against Columbia students, the Students for Justice in Palestine group, that was actually pushed by one of the hostages that was released, that claimed that Hamas militants had told him that they were in direct contact with the Columbia fucking students, and that one of the other points of evidence that they presented in that process,
no doubt,
was that the dormant account became active after months of not being used right before October 7. Because school had come back. The school term had started. Yeah. That's the reason why the account became fucking, it was no longer dormant, because over summer break, no student that was running the account was posting.
Yeah.
But that was enough for them to claim this, and now the DOJ is actually pushing for it as well. The DOJ is entertaining these absolutely insane accusations.
Yeah, they're just all transparently ridiculous. But the point is, like, as citizens, yes, we might be called mean names. We might, like, things might, like, yeah, you can suffer some inconveniences, and especially, if you're still a student, I understand. Like, it's very hard to just lose your degree, or like that's all understandable. But people like no one my age should not be doing something about this. You don't have to go to Gaza. Like, I understand most people can't do that, and it is, it's definitely frightening. But and furthermore, you can't get in, so it doesn't matter. But the problem isn't in Gaza. The problem is here. We have the absolute power to stop this instantly. And I have to be honest, I actually think Trump might actually be more likely to stop it than Biden was, which is terrifying. But they're not going to stop it because they came to a realization.
Yeah.
Like, I had a meeting. This is in the Biden administration, but I had a meeting with a person who's she's a high-level State Department person, not cabinet level, but if I understand how the U.S. government works, which I'm not sure I do, like close to cabinet level. Definitely has meetings with cabinet officials, with Biden, with Blinken, with Brett McGurk. He's not in the cabinet, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I remember asking her, I said, is the issue that the the Biden administration and the major players, is it that they don't know what the Israelis are doing with our weapons, or they just decided it's worth it? And then she said, no, they absolutely know. We talk about your New York Times article. We talk about your Politico article. We talk about stuff that tons and tons of other people have written about. It's no, and no one denies it. Like, apparently Brett McGurk doesn't sit there and go, no, that's just the Hamas doctor that you're quoting. He doesn't say that. They just say,
yeah,
okay. I mean, if we have to, if every child in Gaza has to die so that we can control the Middle East by force, well, that's what it is. I mean, it's, what are you going to do? Yeah. So that's so in other words, we have to change. It's not a matter of explaining it to power. That power already knows what's going on. We have to impose political consequences on people. Now, that obviously doesn't mean voting for Democrats like that, and that might be part of it strategically in this or that place, but that's not really the major issue, because the Democratic Party was just as bad, or at least Biden specifically was just as bad. Yeah. It means doing things that are disruptive. Like, it means doing things that impose a political cost on the administration. Like, for me, that means or trying to organize the medical community in a particular way. And most physicians are absolutely horrified by this, but they're also frightened by speaking out because their institutions are cracking down on them. They don't want bad
they
press,
want to revoke NIH grants for
and now they're even more frightened now, right?
If you don't sign a BDS loyalty
pledge. Right. Yeah,
which is
completely ridiculous. Yeah. It's a whole other discussion. But we have to. We can't just say well, it's risky. Like, yeah, it is risky. I completely understand that it's not that the risk is zero, but there is you're literally talking about being too afraid to stand up for 1 million children who are being starved. It's very. How are you going to explain that to someone in the future?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to lose my job.
Oh, they're going to fucking lie.
Or my, yeah, I mean, people do.
Started,
no,
people have already started lying about their initial positions. As
yeah,
though, like,
no, oh, I've always been opposed. What's the name? What did somebody say? At some point in the future, everyone will have always been opposed to this. Yeah, it's a book, exactly. The it's you know, we have to get, and the only way to do that is to get together with other people. Like, one person is not a political force. It's getting people together, and that's why, you know, like, having a forum like this or having participatory media like this is super important, because having the ability to meet like-minded people, have a discussion that doesn't focus on the same 5 stupid questions I get asked if I go on CNN, you know, having people who are serious and actually want to organize together, want to get a city council resolution passed, whatever stupid little thing you can come up with that you think will help, it will help. Yeah. You know, just
that's why I always say
noise
don't keep
help.
Applying pressure, especially right now, more than ever before, when like there is a tide shift or there is more permission to be able to say certain things without incurring serious penalties. That's why I always try to tell people, like, look, if I'm still doing it with like governments threatening me and you know, engaging in like an incredible amount of reputation smearing, who gives a fuck? You know, that's minor in comparison to being able to do the right thing here. What do you, I'll let you take this one. All right, bombing schools and hospitals is horrifying, but what about hiding under those places in order to use those places as your own shield?
Yeah, so I get why someone would ask that based on
you
like
are
the way
so much nicer than me. That's fucking crazy. I was, oh my God, okay.
You forgot to read the one above it. Is the guy sitting next to Hasan from Palestine?
Yeah.
No, I'm like the guy said, I'm an Indian Parsi. But the and I was born in Houston. But yeah, so you're right. Hiding under schools and hospitals would be
Hamas.
I never got the connection before. Damn it. But yeah, that would absolutely be terrifying and horrifying for someone to do. But let's, again, we talked about this earlier. Just first of all, there is no evidence that that's happening. If you want to reach out to me, I have a public website where anybody can send me an email. Just ask me for the sources, whoever this person asking is. I am happy to show you a history of 20 years of Israel making these claims. They are literally, and I mean this without an exception, literally every single time there's any way of verifying anything related to the attacks on hospitals or on ambulances, which did not start after October 7th. They've been doing this since 2000. Yeah. Probably since before, but certainly since 2000. They're always shown to be false. Yeah. Always. That's a major reason that there are no foreign reporters in Gaza.
I'll take it one step further. Not only is it false, but it's also pure fucking projection.
Yeah,
that's the most insane part about it. Like, the human shield thing is one that really pisses me off. The idea that, like, Hamas militants are strapping children to their chests or something. Yeah. When we know for a fact that there's the Lavender AI targeting system and Where is Daddy, which is an insane...
The name of it is...
Where that deliberately will consider any Palestinian that is enemy combatant aged male, okay, between 14 and 60 or 65 or something. As soon as they enter their home, that's when an alarm is triggered, and immediately the nearest Israeli Air Force drone or Israeli Air Force pilot will bomb that entire building deliberately, assassinating their entire family.
Yeah. On purpose, like it's and quite explicitly, it's deliberate. But just because I saw some stuff,
and they strap Palestinians, and they actually use Palestinians. Like, there was a 63-year-old man that they put in enemy fatigues, like in IDF
Oh,
fatigues.
No. It's not just one case. Yeah. Anybody who wants to read this, search for Haaretz. human shields. I forget there's a specific term that they have for them, but there was a report in Haaretz saying that basically every Israeli army unit has a human shield that they walk around with, and at the end they either let go or simply execute.
Yeah,
it is a shocking story. But just to finish up with the hospitals and ambulances thing, let's just take a few examples. Right, number one, I know it's not Gaza, but still, just illustrates the point. Yes, I think that's it. And there's I think there's certainly more than that though. In Lebanon, I forget the name of the hospital in Beirut, but it was a Hezbollah hospital. It was a hospital which is owned by Hezbollah's charitable wing.
Yeah.
The
Hezbollah
Israeli
is, again,
it is not one thing. Yes, exactly.
Hezbollah has a militant faction.
Yeah.
But Hezbollah also is a party in the Lebanese parliament.
Yeah.
So, the idea that even if Hezbollah is a militant faction, the idea that you get to kill every single person.
The U.S. Army has hospitals too.
Yeah, in a totally fucking sovereign nation is insane to me.
But so the claim, this is during while fighting was actually going on between Hezbollah and Israel. The claim was that Hezbollah was using this hospital. Do you remember this, to hide gold and cash?
Yeah, I remember.
It was it was such a weird. You were like, I remember thinking wait, what? I mean, okay, even if that's true, that certainly doesn't mean you can blow up a hospital because there's money underneath it. That's the weirdest statement ever. But furthermore, because the Israelis don't control entry to Lebanon, a BBC news crew just went there and said, "Excuse me, can we have the keys?" Yeah, here you go. Go look wherever you want.
Yeah,
didn't find anything.
Yeah, and that's how you know it's bullshit, because even in Gaza, because there's no outside, because there's no Western reporters, outside reporters that can report on this stuff. Israel still can't even make up shit. The central, the command structure that they claim was under the Al Shifa hospital
is complete nonsense.
Is ridiculous. It's like tunnels that Israel itself built.
Yeah, which are the only tunnels that are there. But if anybody remembers, if you go back and look for what Israel said when it laid siege to Shifa Hospital in, I guess, November and December of 2023. They said that there was a 3 or 4, I can't remember now, 3 yes, this is the report.
Yeah,
there was a 3-story tunnel complex under Shifa Hospital. It turns out that's not there, which is hardly surprising. How on earth would Hamas build something like that?
Oh, here's the 3D diagram.
Yeah, this is the. So now, just to illustrate how ridiculous this is the exact video. This so I was on Israel's Channel 13 News a few weeks ago, and the comment or the interviewer said, "Oh, but Hamas is hiding in the hospitals." And I said, "No, actually, I've never seen any Hamas in the hospitals." And he said, "Oh no, what are you talking about? We've seen all the videos. There's so much video evidence." And you know what they played? There was a record. They played this crap, and I was like, "What? This is from the real engine. It doesn't even look real. What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's so much evidence." No, so there's none. So I just want to give a few more examples.
It's like having to deal with someone going through a mental health episode. It's like I imagined an alternative reality. Yeah. I drew this drawing and it scared me, and now it's your problem. I'm going to kill as many children as possible.
And this is it was completely made up. So let me just give another example. On March 23rd, this is me personally, okay? I witnessed this. On March 18th, that's when the big bombing campaign resumed, and the last operation I did that day was a 16-year-old boy named Ibrahim Barhoum. He was killed in his hospital room on March 23rd when the Israelis fired a rocket at it. I was literally 2 minutes away from being in that room, so I was almost killed there. The Israelis fired that rocket at his hospital room to kill the other guy in the room, whose name was Ismail Barhoum. They claimed Nadav Shoshani, I think is his name, the IDF International spokesperson. Hello. He claimed that Ismail Barhoum, the target of the attack, who's a 56-year-old Hamas politician that they claimed was the prime minister of Gaza. They said that he had been in the hospital for weeks planning terrorist attacks. Now, one might ask a few questions. Number one, why during a ceasefire, when everyone else from Hamas was just walking around freely, was he hiding in the hospital?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. Why, if there are tunnels under European hospital, which is 2 kilometers that way, doesn't he just go hide in those tunnels? Why is he taking over a ward? Yeah. Thirdly, I walked through there multiple times a day every day. There are no locked doors. There's nobody hiding anywhere. I never saw the guy. He was actually admitted to the hospital a few hours before he was killed in his hospital bed. So these are just complete. And again, leaving aside that it is completely illegal to kill someone in a hospital, even if they are part of Hamas. That's not a thing. But leaving that aside, even the claims that are made to justify it are completely made up. Thirdly, we just had this it also happened to be on March 23rd, this unbelievable all morning long sustained attack on ambulances in Tal al-Sultan, I think, in Rafah, where 15 paramedics, rescue workers, and one UN worker were just simply murdered. And this became a huge deal. Like this for some reason, this really caught the attention of the world press. Everybody who has investigated this has found that the Israelis were lying through their noses about this. They, it's just, I don't even want to go through the details just because it's so irritating. Like you can tell I'm getting kind of irritated. Sorry. But it's just an unbelievable crime. And, so I'm sorry, but every single time there is any evidence, again, if anybody has a counterexample, please email me. I am very happy to discuss it. I would love to find a single counterexample. The only time it is at least that I'm aware of, and I don't know everything in the world for sure, but the only time I'm aware of that Hamas has actually used a medical facility for illegal purposes, but it was not during active conflict, and Amnesty International wrote a report about this, was after Operation Protective Edge, I think it was 2014, they used a decommissioned outpatient part of Shifa Hospital as an interrogation and torture ward. Now, torture wing. So now, obviously, that's not good. You're not supposed to torture people, and you're not supposed to arbitrarily kill people. But that was after the war was over. So there was no they weren't using it to fire rockets. They were using it to interrogate suspected collaborators, right? So again, I don't like people being tortured. That's not good, right? But that has nothing to do with militarizing a hospital.
Once again, Israel also routinely tortures every single Palestinian that they hold captive under military tribunal, military detention, permanent military detention. And not only that, but also obviously squashing collaborators under complete occupation has been historically common practice amongst
it was
any
done in
kind
the
of
Warsaw Ghetto. It was done anywhere
group.
you want to have any success as a resistance group, you're going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And this goes. It's always important to just
the ANC's practice was far more brutal.
Way more brutal. Soweto necklaces, A Soweto necklace is putting a tire around someone's head, filling it up with gasoline, and lighting the gasoline on fire.
Yeah,
that's how collaborators were dealt with in South Africa. It's not pretty, but again, unfortunately, when you are attacking people's most basic and fundamental rights, they will resort to violence. And as the violence escalates, it escalates. Again, it's not pretty at all. It's horrifying. Can you imagine dying that way? I mean, Jesus.
But standards of violence are always dictated by the colonial power.
Yes, exactly. It's always
Israel.
The more powerful actor is always the one that has the ability to act more violently. That's not surprising at all.
Yeah.
But again, just to bring it back to us, it really tells us something. Because you mentioned the torture of Palestinians. It tells us something about our own society, that Palestinian. So when Israeli prisoners Israeli hostages have been released from Gaza by Hamas, they were going through this big ceremony and which people said was humiliating, and I actually don't disagree with that. It obviously was a show for propaganda purposes. Okay, fine. And people said, "Oh, they're so thin. They haven't eaten." It's like, well, right. No, I mean, number one, they haven't eaten because no food is being allowed into Gaza. So that like I said this on the Israeli show. I said,
also their conditions were far.
No, that's
far
exactly
better.
what I wanted to get to. Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you compare that, which no Western outlet has had any concern whatsoever about because remember, these are prisoner exchanges, right?
Yeah.
Or hostage exchanges, whatever you want to call it. They're the exchange of Israelis for Palestinians. Huge numbers of Palestinians were released. They all came out with scabies. Scabies is a disease that is so uncommon that in the United States, if we see somebody in the hospital with it, we assume they are the victims of elder abuse. And I mean this literally. It's a horrifying skin infection. They're all coming out with it. I was with a surgeon named Khaled Al-Ser when I was at Nasser this last time, and he was imprisoned by the Israelis for 6 months, and he was given a privileged position in because as a healthcare worker, he was given a privileged position in the prison. He was still beaten senseless. He was still tormented. He was still tortured. He was still starved. But he was relatively privileged compared to those. He showed me a picture of himself when he got out. I thought he was his grandfather. I'm not exaggerating. I said, "Oh, this is your grandpa?" He said, "No, that's me." I said, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Jeez, I couldn't believe it. He showed me all the scars he still has all over his body from scabies. He showed he said when he got to his home, the International Committee for the Red Cross does the exchanges, they facilitate them, and they offered him the opportunity. They said you can make a phone call to tell your parents you're coming. He said no. Who knows what'll happen? I don't want them to know that I'm being released until I'm there. Until I'm literally standing with them. They didn't recognize him. Oof. When he showed up. He said, "Mom, it's me." And that's. And this is extremely common. People are coming out. There's plenty of video about this if people want to see it. There are Palestinians coming out who are literally rocking back and forth like this, like a torture victim from a Saw movie. And it's horrifying the way they're being released. Has any of this ever been published?
No.
Has it ever been on the front page of CNN? Israel releases batch of tormented, horrendously treated, starved, scabies-ridden civilians kidnapped from Gaza. Has that ever been a headline somewhere?
No.
That tells you something about who we not. Again, we don't run CNN, obviously, but it tells us something about the voices that are prominent in our society. It tells you something about what our institutions actually are, and it tells you why we need alternative ones like this. Actually.
Yeah, Zach Foster pointed to this as well. Said it's an indisputable fact that on average, based on available evidence, Palestinian forces treat Israeli captives and hostages dramatically better than Israeli forces treat Palestinian captives and hostages.
Yeah, and I'm sorry,
it's the same. It's very similar to the condition of the captives released under NVA care versus under U.S. imprisonment.
Oh yeah,
and even then, the NVA also did torture some of the prisoners of war as well.
And no one should think that being in Hamas captivity is fun. It's terrifying. Can you imagine? First of all, it's terrifying because you're being bombed constantly. You have no idea if you're going to die.
Which is, again, very common sentiment shared by every single hostage that has been released.
And the hostages' families.
Was the fear that they experienced from, not from Hamas specifically, but from Israeli bombing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No doubt these people were frightened by their captors too. I don't want to make any pretense of anything else. It doesn't seem like they were, like, I'm sure some people were beaten. I'm sure, again, hard to imagine that otherwise, right? I'm sure people were abused, but people's actual terror seems to have come mostly from the bombing, And then on top of that, something just to tie it back to what that guy asked about the hospitals. Another thing that Israel has used to justify attacks on hospitals is saying that the hostages were taken to hospitals. Now, obviously, again, Hamas should just release the hostages unconditionally. That's universally understood. But since they're not going to do that, should they deny the hostages health care?
Yeah.
That's a very strange thing to say. There was just a video maybe probably a month and a half ago of Israel bombing. It was right after Israeli bombardment of a tunnel where a hostage was being kept. And again, the Israelis know the hostages are being held in the tunnels, or at least they claim they know that.
Yeah.
And they're bombing the shit out of them anyway. So there's a video of the Hamas. This is a crazy story. Remember now, everybody who remains in Hamas captivity is an Israeli soldier who was captured. They're not civilians who were captured
at this point.
Now, not before, but now because of the exchanges that have happened.
Yeah.
So this guy is an Israeli soldier whom Israel just bombed in a tunnel. He's buried. The Hamas guys are digging him out with their hands.
Yeah.
They pull him out and he's saying, I can't breathe. So they administer him oxygen, right? Now, suppose he has a pneumothorax. Suppose he has a bleed in his abdomen from something hitting. In other words, suppose he needs a surgeon. Should they just say, well, we don't want to militarize a hospital, so we're not going to? No, that's crazy. If you're going to hold somebody in captivity, you are obviously responsible for keeping them safe as much as you can. I mean, you can't stop bombs from falling out of the sky.
They filmed it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, they filmed it for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
So these are, everybody has to take a little bit of a step back when it comes to this idea that Hamas is militarizing hospitals in the Gaza Strip or militarizing ambulances or any other such thing. I think that this might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bombings are still ongoing.
Oh yeah. And I mean, just think about the lunacy of this. Hamas people are pulling Israeli soldiers who would otherwise die, who would otherwise have they would die from being buried alive.
Yeah.
How awful is that? I mean, this is crazy.
It goes back to the Hannibal doctrine, obviously, where like the Israeli military would rather kill Israeli occupying force soldiers than allow them to be held captive as prisoners of war in exchange for numerous hostages that Israel holds, because it creates a lot of political tension internally. And their ambitions are very clearly to just simply use the hostages and use Hamas as a way to continue the ethnic cleansing campaign.
Yeah, it's a way to solve the Gaza problem. The Gaza problem is that Gaza exists and there are Palestinians there. And that, I mean that quite literally.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, it's pretty obvious. Sometimes people think that it's being cynical to say that, oh no, how can you say they weren't affected by October 7th and they're just taking it? No. Of course they were affected by October 7th. It was, again, a major atrocity. But that doesn't stop state planners from immediately saying, how are we going to use this? The same thing is, people should remember, and Norm Finkelstein's talked about this too, but people should remember on 9/11, 2001, right? Like the attacks on the Twin Towers and on the Pentagon. On that day, Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney sat around, looked at a map, and said, do you think we can attack Iraq? Do you think we can attack Afghanistan? Do you think we can invade Iran? How can we, they literally, on that day.
Yeah.
It was a massive atrocity. It was shocking. I knew people who didn't live through it maybe don't remember. Like, I was in Baltimore in college, just a few miles south, or not a few miles, 100 miles south, I guess. But we were shocked. Everyone was losing their fucking minds about it. We were going, we didn't know, is someone going to blow up Johns Hopkins University too? Turns out no.
Yeah.
But it was people were panicking, and the leaders of the American government were sitting around trying to figure out how to use it politically. That is unfortunately normal state behavior for criminal states.
Yeah.
So the exact same thing was done here. It's just it's very unfortunate, but we didn't make the rules.
All right. One final question I want to ask you. Did you ever, this is a question from the chat, did you ever feel targeted by the IDF?
Targeted? No, definitely not. In fact, one of the reasons that I go to Gaza is precisely because I know that the Israelis will try to avoid killing me. They could kill me and they would 100% get away with it. Nobody would give a shit. I mean, like, you would care, your audience would care, but but nobody in the American government would care.
Yeah,
it would be reported, and it would be a media headache for a few days. And this is why do our spokespeople have to defend this? And they'd say, well, yes, we understand he's a New York Times author and a trauma surgeon, and he has no criminal record, and he's never been convicted or accused of terrorism, and is but we think he was working with Hamas. And then CNN would write an article that says suspected Hamas militant Feroze Sidhwa was killed in Vassar Hospital. So in reality, it wouldn't affect them at all, but it would be a headache for them. So the way I actually look at it is that I'm actually providing some protection to my colleagues when I'm there. I was like I mentioned Ibrahim being killed in his room on March 23rd. I went. So I was going down to his room to change his dressings because he was going to go home the next morning. Like, he was fine, actually. He was one of the few patients that had recovered well. And I walked past the ICU, and one of the doctors came out and just said, "Hey, Feroze, there's a bleeding guy in here. Can you help with him?" He'd been transferred from another hospital. His name was Mohammed. He was also a 16-year-old boy, actually. But so I went and I just went and looked at that guy for about 10 minutes, and I said, "Yeah, he absolutely needs to go to the OR. You guys," I told the ICU team, "you get him into the OR. Tell the OR he needs to go. I'm going to go change Ibrahim's dressings, and I'm going to come back upstairs, and we'll get this kid taken care of," because the ICU was the 4th floor and the surgical ward was the 2nd floor. And as I opened the ICU door to just go down the stairs and go to his room, that's when his room exploded. So I was pretty. I don't want to be given to false modesty or something. I was pretty close to being killed, and that was very scary. in retrospect. But but I didn't think they were actually targeting me. In fact, if they wanted to target me, they would just wait until I was in the room, you know?
Yeah.
And then furthermore, they would have had like that would have made it easier for them to justify my death because everyone agreed, you know, despite the fact that it was, again, totally 100% illegal to kill Ismail Barhoum in that room. Nobody in the American media felt that way, right? So they would have just said, well, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, no, I don't think I was targeted by them.
Okay. All right,
furthermore, if they wanted to kill me, it'd probably be easier to do it in Stockton than in Nasser.
Maybe. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, man.
This was incredibly illuminating, enlightening. It's, I mean, you're super brave. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Yeah, this was an incredible, hard to have, but an incredible conversation. Is there any final parting words that you want to leave with the people here?
No, just like I said, get together with your neighbors, your coworkers, whoever it is. Just get together with them and figure out some way. If it's getting a city council resolution passed, if it's talking to more people, whatever it is, it is a political problem, and unfortunately, that means it has a political solution. And I hate politics just as much as everybody else because it sucks. But if we're gonna have any success in stopping this, it has to happen now, and it is a political solution to a political problem. That's all there is to it.
Okay, to end it on a lighter note, have you seen The Pit?
Yeah. I've seen the first like 4 or 5 episodes.
Do you feel like it's realistic?
You know, there's a lot of stuff that medically is nonsense, but kind of like Scrubs, they actually do a good job of conveying like the emotions and the interpersonal difficulties and the stress of working in a hospital, and especially in an emergency room, and especially like a post-COVID emergency room. You know, those guys did go through quite a lot. I'm a surgeon, so I didn't really treat that many people with COVID, and I'm a trauma surgeon, so I'm used to a lot of my patients dying, but most people are not.
Yeah,
most
you guys didn't get favorable coverage on The Pit.
Trauma surgeons?
Yeah, they were. Well, they made it seem like the surgeons were upper class as opposed to the ER, the emergency room.
They're the real working guys, and the surgeon, the young lady, the young lady just comes down and is like, I'm just gonna do stuff and get pissed off. I remember the episode where she has a scalpel dropped into her shoe from one of the ER residents. I was laughing about that.
Yeah, surgeons don't know. Surgeons don't understand the ER room complications. Like ER people get their hands dirty. That's what they were implying.
Yeah, it depends which hospital you're at. You know, in mine, we work really closely with our ER docs. Like for every trauma activation in our hospital, I'm right there. Like I'm there before the patient arrives for the most part. And we work them up together. But in a lot of hospitals, it is actually the way they show it in the bed. Not that the surgeons are all douchebags, but just that the ER really does the work until a surgeon is actually needed. Because most trauma patients don't need an emergency operation. The vast majority of the time, you're fine, or you broke your arm, you broke your leg. We'll call an orthopedic surgeon. No big deal. You'll get taken care of tomorrow. Just chill out until then. But for the minority that do, that's what we're there for. But yeah, no, it's a good show. I like it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you
for coming
on.
on.
No, thanks a lot.
Thanks for doing this. This was you were all over the place. I know it was difficult.
She's agile.
All right, everybody. Thank you. I'm gonna go back to doing other regular news coverage now. After we had this long conversation.